Welcome to the 2020 Hope Global Forum's annual meeting, America on Reset, Healing a Nation, Opportunity for All.
Hi, this is John Hope Bryant, founder of Operation Hope, and welcome to the Hope Global Forum annual meeting 2020, Healing a Nation, Opportunity for All, America on Reset. This is going to be a wonderful, rich, and important conversation for the nation. Sports has always brought us together. In many ways, this is the one place where we have not argued. It's the one place that you see everybody. And America is now in a bit of a food fight, a family squabble. And once again, we're finding that professional sports, and particularly here, football, just might be a place where we can lock arms, not in a tackle and not in a pass, but in an embrace, in the creation of a new bridge of understanding. But rainbows only follow storms. You cannot have a rainbow without a storm first. So we're going to deal with some real stuff in this session. It's featuring two people that I have gained enormous respect for, one of which is a dear friend of mine that I call a brother from another mother. And you know him as the owner of the San Francisco 49ers, who's, I am joking with the beard, calling him the Brad Pitt of professional team owners. I'm not sure what his wife feels about that, but I think it's cool.
You didn't like the beard.
She doesn't like the beard. I like it. But I won't. But whatever she likes is what I like. So let me be clear about that. And Jed is yes, he's smart, and he's the CEO of the 49ers. The family owns the team, and they're known for the Super Bowl wins and all that. But Jed also has a big heart and a big soul, and and he's authentic, and you're gonna see a lot of that in this 30 minutes. And then we have a new friend, Azeez AlShaair. And Azeez is that new era leader, that new era leadership, that man on the field, quite literally. He's one of the stars in the making at the 49ers, but he's also a star off the field, in the community, in his own life, as a role model, walking. Now, none of us are perfect, so that's not what today is about. But a saint is a sinner that got up. And I've already said rainbows only follow storms. So in some ways, it's the imperfections of him, not the genius and perfection of what he does on the field, but his life off the field and his life story that I think will inspire you the most. Let's get into this conversation and go right to the heart of the matter. Jed, really, we're dealing with a global health pandemic that's larger than anything the world's seen in 120 years. We're dealing with a national economic crisis, and we're dealing with a 400-year-old social justice reckoning for Black America. And in many ways, this social justice reckoning didn't start, and you know this, didn't start this year. Didn't start last year. This conversation in many ways has been going on for a while. And in some ways it came to prominence right there at the home of the 49ers with Colin Kaepernick taking a knee. So let's just deal with this straight up and figure out, where do we go from here? Because I believe we got to go from taking a knee to building a community. But what did that mean to you then? And what does that mean to you now?
I mean, I've grown up with a lot of privilege in my life. And where I grew up in Youngstown, Ohio, there were, wealthy folks, and there were a lot of blue collar folks and people that needed support in order to survive. And, the racial diversity was really, it was black and white. There wasn't a ton of other, diversity that was in Youngstown when I grew up. And I think I always understood that there was racial injustice, but it wasn't something that smacked you in the face the way that I think we've seen it in the last several years. And when Colin started his act of taking a knee, and then that led to conversations within our locker room, and obviously there was conversations outside of our building that we couldn't control outside, but we can control inside. What I've seen from most of America that has responded to George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, too many names to go through. We we had a lot of those revelations when we started having conversations in 2016 with Cap. And now it's like the light is actually going on for people that we may need to address this problem. And that's the thing. Like I think we're all very, very cognizant that there is a racial divide. And now is a time for us to be able to do things about it. And unfortunately, there's a lot of work to be done. And like in a football game, you can't, come back from a 28-point deficit in one play. You have to figure out piece by piece, how do you build this thing back up? And I think that's what we're trying to do. And part of that is working with our players, working with our community, working with great organizations like Operation Hope to figure out how can we help minimize that divide and bring everybody closer together and give everybody an equal opportunity, which I think is what America is all about.
Yeah. And thank you for dealing with and addressing the issue head on, which is not something I'm not surprised at all. I know you personally and privately and know your sentiments, and I'm proud to know you, by the way, call you a friend, even though I like your wife more than I like you. And Azeez, I want you to speak to this. I'm going to say something we haven't talked about this before the interview, but I have a gut. I mean, I grew up in Compton, California, South Central LA. I was a really horrible football player. I was mostly the tackling dummy. But what my sense is that you have these players, going back to take a knee for a minute, and why that was the agency of expression. I think you have these players who have been lucky. They've been blessed beyond belief. 40 million Black people, and they're one of X numbers who are on a professional football team doing extraordinarily well, incredible contracts, incredible exposure, incredible opportunity. And they feel they've left the whole community behind. Like, not their fault, but like, the hood that left behind, their family that left behind, the cousins, their best friend. They couldn't hook anybody up when they came along. They couldn't say, hey, come with me, I'm gonna get you on the team too. It was their contract. And they're on this field, and they're witnessing directly or indirectly social injustice happening in the Black community and other communities. And my sense was the frustration was, I don't know what else to do to show my solidarity and to express my frustration with this other than just take a knee. Like, let me do something. But what I think what they really would like to have done was change the reality, not just take a knee. Change the community, not just take a knee. But that was what they thought they had as their optionality in that moment. Azeez, am I wrong about that presumption?
No, not without a doubt. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. I remember when Colin Kaepernick first took a knee, I was still in high school at the time. I remember watching the 49ers play when they played in that Super Bowl against the Ravens. And just around all that time, I just remember all the things that I was going through in my life. And when you are people think that you're the exception when you make it out of the situations that people like myself or you and a lot of different minorities and just the United States have been through. I think that you forget like what it's really like living like that and being kind of like the floor mat for everybody to kind of step on. Like, it's just things that'll happen to you. I remember being young and my mom's first teaching me how to drive. Like, this is my experience of learning how to drive. I remember driving and I'm in the driver's seat. My mom's sitting there on the passenger seat, and we're driving right around the corner to this little corner store. I just got my permit at school last week, and I've been begging her to come out and drive with me. We go on a Saturday. We're driving to this corner store and get pulled over by two police officers, and my windows roll down. The police officer sitting there harassing me and my mother about how I didn't have my seatbelt on, and then my tent was too dark, but my windows were rolled down. It was just a hot mess, and it's just like stuff like that that realistically were nothing. But you see so many people the same way how, thank God I was able to end that whole altercation and experience, clean and be able to talk about it. But for somebody else, something so simple can turn into them losing their life. And I just think that, like you said, it's hard because you don't know how else to express those feelings to people. And I think what Colin Kaepernick did was so smart, because a lot of times people don't really care about the issues and they kind of sweep them under the rug. Obviously guys like yourself and Jed, like, you try to bring these to the forefront. But for a lot of people in the world who are watching, the biggest platform that we have, which is actually playing on that field, I think when you do that at such the level that he did, it just brings so much more awareness and attention to it.
Yeah, and let's build on that now, because I think that, I've gotten a call from several Black Lives Matter protesters recently who said, John, we feel like we're running out of runway here, that we've been protesting and bringing attention to this, but we've mastered this strategy in the streets, but somehow we got to transfer this into a business plan in the suites. we got to get from the streets to the C-suites and create, we need a plan of action to actually operationalize this into something real. Jed said something really brilliant, which was, you cannot expect to come back from a 24-point deficit in one play, or maybe, who knows, maybe even, in one quarter, although the 49ers have been known to do that and more. But the analogy is that people are frustrated right now, and they're taking their, and Jed and others become punching bags for historic frustrations. But we cannot make these decisions emotionally. We've got to, yes, express ourselves. And, Jed is the first, I think, to admit that he doesn't have to think about being white. You and I have to think about being black every day. In a minute, I'm going to ask you about how you grew up, because I don't think that people understand your story and the actual story of the average professional player, who they just see as this gladiator, this sort of superhero on the field, refined. They don't understand the backstory. But, you and I, even with our success today, we still think about being black every day. It's exhausting. And Jed doesn't have to think about being white at all, because why should he? And that is a demarcation mark that begins. That's where the conversation begins, and then we got to sort of go from there. Your backstory, and let me say, Jed and every other white person, I should say, doesn't have to think about being white. They probably never think about being white. Why? Why would you have to? But your story, you also think about your family. You think about your mom. You think about your siblings. Didn't you grow up in a family? It was almost like its own little city. You had like 8 or 9 siblings, and in my understanding, of everybody else woke up in a house that was safe and sound, and the smell of food crackling and breakfast being prepared. You woke up to the smell of smoke because your house was burned down. Help me understand this. Give me this in your backstory.
Yeah, so I grew up in Tampa, Florida, and I had 7 brothers and sisters, so it was 8 of us. So yeah, we almost had our own little starting lineup. I remember my dad's friends used to mess with us all the time, like, "Oh, there goes your basketball team," and then they just kept getting bigger and bigger, so they started saying football teams. But yeah, man, I grew up in Tampa, Florida, and my 7 brothers and sisters, and my mom and my dad were together earlier in my life, but my father was abusive with my mom, and they ended up getting divorced. And I remember my dad left when I was 10 years old, and even at the time, we were always bouncing around from place to place, never had a true place to stay, and just struggled, and then when he left, it kind of just crumbled. Like, my mom, as a woman, it's already tough for any woman, and then, like we spoke on being black in general, like, women have a long way to go as far as the issues with men and women, and just the workforce and everything in itself in America, let alone being black and being a female with 8 children is that's a lot of a lot of stress to bear. And, you know, for my mom, it was very, very tough for us. We grew up homeless pretty much from that point on. And it was just the things that we had to go through to try to survive. I remember taking the city bus from this motel that we lived at, dropping my little brothers off at their school. I'm 15 years old at the time. I was 13 years old at the time. Dropping my little brothers off at school, getting back on the city bus and going to school. It was almost 3.5 hours that I would have to do this every single day at 13 years old for my two little brothers. And I just think, like, I remember going home and literally when we get off of school, my mom wouldn't be back home until like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock at night because she's trying to work to make sure that we could at least stay in the motel that we were living in. And I remember I would be going to this Family Dollar, going to steal candy and chips and stuff so that we could have food to eat for dinner. And literally, like, we would eat freaking Starburst and hot fries for dinner every day because that's all I'd be able to go get. And it's just crazy because, like, I just think about different things, and I know it might be trailing away from just my story in general, but I think about Khalif Browder. Like, I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with him, but he was sentenced
Really
to
right.
3 years in Rikers Island, and for stealing a backpack that had $300 in it, or allegedly stealing, because he didn't even actually steal it. He was accused of stealing it, and he actually didn't. But he was sentenced to 3 years in Rikers Island at like 16 or 17 years old, and ended up committing suicide because he went crazy in there. He was in solitary confinement for almost 2 years, and I just think, like, for me, the things that I had to go through and do, stealing food, at 13 years old, not knowing any better, just trying to find something to eat for my brothers and sisters, thinking I was doing something right. And then to see somebody like that, something like that happen to him, and I wear him on the back of my helmet, and I think about him every day, just because I know that could easily have been me or any other black man in America. But going back to
So,
my
so
story.
Azeez, let's start right there for a minute. So if you think about our suburban friends, our white friends who live in a suburban neighborhood, and their kid steals a backpack at school, what would probably happen is the school counselor would, or the campus, the police, the security person would say, hey, grab them by the shoulder, bring them into the principal's office. They call the parents and they give the kid a really strong lecture about, this is really bad behavior. You keep this up, nothing good's going to come to you. Of course, you can't do this to your friend Joey. They give them some really strong lecture. Might not even cause them to cry, her to cry, but a really strong lecture. And they send them home with their parents. And it's the end of it. Don't steal a backpack again. This young man went to prison and committed suicide, and his story is over. And that's so much of our experience in our neighborhoods. You when you were going through that experience, I think you ate one good meal a day. If I recall, not even a good meal, just a meal.
That was the meal we ate at school. I remember it was this lunch lady that I had. Her name was Miss B, and her grandson was on the football team with us. But she used to always give me extra food after school. I would go behind the back of the school, and she would give me all these little chocolate milks. People always mess with me because I love chocolate milk, but it's because this lady in high school, since I was a freshman, would give me all this chocolate milk and these like little cheese sticks that we used to have at school, and I would take it home too so we could eat that. And honestly, it's just, like I said, it's just stuff that the average person shouldn't, like, you just don't have to deal with stuff like that. You shouldn't have to deal with things like that. But and the black community and just minorities in general, like, that's just like, oh, that happened to you too? Okay, cool. It's like, it was just common. It's common that things like that go on. And yes, while there's extreme cases and people's stories get very, very deep, I have multiple different things that have happened to me in my life where my friends might not have had that much go on. It's still so similar. It's so not far off from what my buddy or somebody else that I might not even know who's in the same area might be going through.
But I think that's what's striking to me, is that again, like I will generalize, white America is starting to hear that sort of as a first time in the last 6, 8 months. But with a football team, if you remember the book and then the movie The Blind Side, it's like, wow, look at this kid, like he came from, and it's like, I can name 10 people on my team right now that have this same story. And you go through that, and it's like, does that not mean that there's something wrong? Like like there should be one Michael Orr that had this, and oh my God, look what he overcame. It shouldn't be multiple people, hundreds of people in the league, if not more, that have essentially the same story. And then when you look at different things that African Americans need to overcome on top of being in a lower socioeconomic background and things like that, like the chances of getting out are very, very difficult. I mean, like my grandfather, like you said, like I don't have to think about being white. My grandfather did when his family got here. He was an Italian immigrant. I'm not saying that it's the same thing, but had to overcome things. But you have to get so many things right that you're not afforded a mistake. You're not afforded a, hey, I took my buddy's pen, I took my buddy's backpack. Like you're not afforded those things when you're in that situation. And that's why you see, folks that come from those situations that do achieve, they achieve so much because they had to overcome everything. And I don't think that it's not something that people comprehend. And that's where you're trying to make it where it's not like, I'm not trying to make up for anything that somebody that I was never connected to did 200 years ago. My family wasn't here 200 years ago when slavery existed. But that doesn't mean that we haven't put African Americans specifically and other racial minorities in general in a place where it is very, very difficult to have the opportunity for the American dream.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You said it. You said it exactly right, Jed. And as I was thinking about your grandfather, you're right. He was discriminated against. And if you think about the early 1900s, the protests were 100% white people doing the same thing that Black people are doing now. Those were those new immigrants who were saying, we want to get in that suite and off the street into the land of opportunity. Imagine though, now you're not a white immigrant, you're a former Black slave, and you cannot mainstream. My white friends have been able to succeed in mainstream. My Latino friends can mainstream. The Asian friends can mainstream. You're Black for life. And it's Chris Rock had this skit. He said it was on the stage. He told this white audience, "I'm Black, I'm rich, and I'm famous, and you wouldn't give anything to be me." in a sort of the daily context of life, you want the prominence, you want the floss of it, but you don't want the reality of my life. And so the resiliency, Jed, that your grandfather's experience through your parents, through you, has now caused you to be who you are. That resiliency times 10, I think, is built my man Azeez here, and I think he shows that on the field. That has turned into strength and excellence on the field. Now the question is, how do we go from the field of competition in sports to the field of community building? Is that where we're headed next? Is that the legacy of taking the knee? And what do we do about it? Is the model what we're doing in the Bay Area, is that possibly one example of what we do about it?
Well, I know what we talked about, and Dr. Harry Edwards, who unfortunately can't be around right now with COVID, but this is somebody that, helped with the 1968 Olympic protest in Mexico City. He's been an advisor to the 49ers since the early 1980s. And he helped with Cap, he helped with me, he helped with the team. And his message to me was from protest to progress. And I believe in that strongly. And again, it is not my specific protest. And I fully understand that. But if we can help get to progress, And again, progress can go in a lot of different areas, but that's what we've tried to do right now is figure out how do we get to progress. And that's why working with Azeez, I mean, Eric Armstead is another guy that's done so much with his platform and has done it in a way that, I think is unique and out of the box, but he's trying to help his community. And it's like, how do we as the 49ers, a billion-dollar sports organization with multimillionaire players, like we have money, we have power, we have influence. How do we advance this ball down the field and make real change? And that's something that we have to do. It's just we have to get it aligned to where we're not just doing our own individual thing that may help something, but it's not helping a systemic problem. And that's what's hard, is to get people on the same page to focus on and fight a systemic problem.
So I'm gonna argue with you a little bit, Jed. You said it's not your protest. I actually think you're being too humble because there are very few people I get more texts from who are frustrated. I was going to use another phrase, frustrated, upset, done through. You're screaming at the TV set. What are we doing here? And last time I checked, you are not black. I mean, you might be. You're so cool. You might have some brother blood running through you. But I think it is your protest. It is your America. You're saying this is not my country. This is my country, and we're not going to treat our brothers and sisters like this. We're all interconnected. We're all interrelated. Azeez, I'm gonna go out on a limb here, and I'm gonna connect all of us now. And I'm gonna say something really bold. And we there's no rehearsals here. There's nobody knows we're gonna talk about. Heaven knows I'm off the hook and off the chain on what I decide to say. Nobody knows where I'm going. But I'm gonna say something, and you react to it. You think it's a crappy idea? Say it. You think it's a good idea? Say it. We've got this partnership with the NFL, where we're doing economic empowerment, financial literacy. It started a year ago and continued this year. We have a partnership now with the 49ers that is a sort of a model partnership tied to that national partnership where it's on the ground, affecting communities. In the Bay Area, I think our partnership there also includes U.S. Bank. Getting from the suites back to the streets to get folks to the suites. And 100% of these in-place shootings, in neighborhood shootings where people lived, of blacks and police, have been in 500 credit score neighborhoods. I don't believe it's a coincidence. And so what I'm saying is, I can't make you like me, but I can really encourage you to treat me differently and treat me better. If the tax on you for hurting me is your job, your net worth, your reputation, you probably will treat me, if I'm a stakeholder, if I'm an owner, if you know that this is a middle-class neighborhood or wealthy neighborhood, people own businesses and homes, police are more inclined to protect and serve than observe and harass. And I think the way we move forward is that in the 21st century, let me be very clear, is through economic empowerment, social justice, through wealth building, job creation, good jobs, and economic empowerment for all. That levels the playing field. It raises the economic energy. It increases the optimism, the self-esteem, the confidence of communities. It increases your optionality. It doesn't mean somebody's not going to treat you bad, but it allows you to respond to them if they do, and it incentivizes them not to. Now, I just said a whole lot there, but push back or agree, disagree, whatever. But I really think that we now to pivot from taking a knee to building a community.
No, without a doubt. It's so funny because I have a brother who's a year older than me. He was the fourth child, and he went. I remember he went to go live with my grandmother. So we didn't grow up from the time we were about 10, 11 years old until we got older. We didn't really grow up together from that point, but we still, it's my blood, but I love him to death. And he's actually a police officer. He's a police officer back in Tampa, Florida. And this off season, we had hours and hours and hours of conversation about just everything going on. And I wanted to know the perspective from a police officer, and I know somebody who was not going to sugarcoat anything. It's my brother, you know. So I felt like, you know, like my wife or my family, like, oh, you're a football player. Tell me about the organization. What's going on? Like I felt like that. I felt like a fan almost. Like I want the inside scoop. So you know, we had those conversations, and I was telling them, you know, he talks about how he wears his badge with him everywhere. He takes his badge with, even when he's off duty. And I had asked him because he was talking about it. I'm like, okay, so why do you feel like you got to do that? And I was like, I promise you. And he's sitting there, we thinking about it, and we talking. He's like, well, he starts stuttering. He can't really answer that question because he's trying to, you know, just find the answer for it. And the reality of it is you are black, and you are wearing that badge. Is the only thing that saves you from being like everybody else. Like for me, this 49er thing is the only that logo right there is the only thing that saves me from being like everybody else. So many times I've walked into places, been around people, and that they won't even look me in the eye. They like, oh, this guy. You know, I'm very modest in how I dress. I ain't walking around with chains on and nothing crazy. You wouldn't know anything. I ride my bike to work every day, for God's sake. So you would just think I'm just another guy. And then the second they find out I play football for the 49ers, I mean, the whole vibe is completely different. Everybody loves you now. You know what I'm saying? Now, oh, you need anything? Hey, can I get you a drink for free? Oh, no, it's on the house. Don't worry about it. And it's just, that's just the reality of what we live in, you know. And to also talk about, like we talked about the penalizing and stuff like that for the officers and giving them something to think about. I mean, I talked to my brother about that too, and it's the same thing for like a football player. You get fined for roughing the passer and all these different things, and I promise you, every time we're out there on that field, I didn't think about it last year when I was a rookie because I didn't know any better. But the second you get that first FedEx and it's $15,000 and that's basically your whole game check, like, you know what? I think I'm gonna ease up a little bit. And so yes, it definitely makes you think, because obviously one thing that is not gonna ever change is there is billions and billions and billions of people in this world. There's always going to be somebody that don't like somebody else. There's always going to be somebody that sees a skin color and says, I don't like that. I don't want that for my daughter. I don't want that for my family, whatever. And that's, you know what? That's cool. You're not trying to ask somebody to like you. You know what I'm saying? That's not what the goal is. I think I don't need, like, nobody. It's like begging for a friend. You don't need somebody to be your friend, but you just want to be respected. You know, you want to be treated the same as the next person, and that's the bottom line. Somebody might not like you, but I promise you, if your money is on the line, they'll respect you, and that's just what it comes down to. It comes down to, like you said, the same thing with the credit score thing. It's about what you have and what you economically, what you are willing to lose and what you want to gain. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people under those circumstances are losing your job, and even like Jed, you talked earlier about, you know, one of your friends, one of the CEOs, who like they want to help, but they don't know how to put it into words, and it's not like they mean harm or mean anything bad, but they're just afraid of the backlash. It's the same thing. Like people, with everything that goes on, you say something on Twitter 10 years ago, and somebody pulls it up, and you got something good going for yourself, but you said something out of character or whatever it might have been, and you could lose it all. Just the risk of losing what you worked for, I think, has to be more magnified in that field, because I remember I saw something on Instagram or Twitter the other day or a couple weeks ago, and it was like, you can't afford to have a bad pilot if you're flying a plane. Let's say, okay, well, only 2% or whatever, or something like that. I was saying like only 1% or 2% or something like that of our planes crash every year. And it's like, okay, 2% of the planes crashing and this many planes. It was some crazy number. It's like, damn, I don't want to take that chance at all. You know what I'm saying? It just doesn't. It sounds crazy, and I get it. Like, I mean, you see so many different videos of police shootings, and I promise you, like, I could not imagine being in a police officer's shoes, and I just think that it's tough. It's a tough situation to be in for a police officer, and it's damn sure tough to be in that situation. You know, just being a minority or African American. So I think that it's great how it's being pushed to the forefront, and the first step, I think we obviously are past that now, but that first step was, you know, kind of blasting it and putting all the information out there, because like Jed said earlier as well, a lot of white people don't even know that there's an issue going on. a lot of my white
Yeah.
friends is like, oh, I didn't know that was a thing. They only know about my story. Like, man, you're great. It's like you're the trophy. You know, you're just that one exception. I'm like, no, listen, this is how it is. Period. And you know, it's
Yes,
just it's so much. It's so deep, and I'm just very happy that it's actually the ball is rolling. I think we think it's going slow, but I promise you, it's I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, especially with how many people we have in this world. You know, but I think that it's definitely going in a great direction.
man, you are such an inspiration. I'm so glad that we met through Jed, and I think a lot of people are have a whole different view of you, professional football players, communities, the underserved, uh, through your voice. Through somebody might have started uh, this program and just looked at your twisties because they're not used to seeing twisties. And maybe they might have judged you because they're not used to, they don't know about twisties. By the time you finish talking, they see a brain. They see one of the smartest people they've ever met who just has a different way to wear his hair. That's the way the world should be. Okay. But we've got to make the abnormal normal. And I agree with you. I'd rather you respect me and learn to like me than like me and never respect me. And you can take no pleasure from the fact there's a hole in my end of our boat because racism is a tax on all of us. Bad policing, as you said, you cannot have a pilot with you can't be saying, oh, well, there's only 2% of planes went down. You don't want to be on one of those planes. All right. How about we get that down to zero? There
Exactly.
there are certain occupations where the bar responsibility is just higher. And law enforcement is one of them. I'd love to have a conversation in the future with you and your brother. I think it's a very rich conversation. Here in the same family, right? Two different badges, two different perspectives. And your brother, loves his community too. He also wants to get home at night, right? And so there's this dynamic. There's this constant friction. This is life. What we're talking about here, this is the real world. And democracy is messy. Justice is messy. Capitalism and free enterprise and opportunity is messy. And we've got to be the ones to create the clarity, to create the path, and to create the fair play. And I'm so honored to be with two leaders who I think are playing an important part in our history. We're out of time. We were out of time a while ago, but this is such a rich conversation. I didn't want to stop it. I do want to say other thing for the record. And again, Azeez, you correct me if I'm wrong. Jed and I have talked about it privately. This whole thing about defund the police is really bad marketing. Like, we don't really mean defund the police. We mean the police are doing too many jobs. Like, you got them being a marriage counselor, a financial clerk, a psychologist, a shrink, a domestic abuse advisor. We need to let the police do the police job and take some of that funding and put it to community-based policing and mental health and other things in the community. It's just really bad. That's just a really bad brand that somebody put forward. But it really is about what you've been saying all along, which is holding people accountable to a higher standard and treating our communities as you want to be treated. Did I get that right?
No, without a doubt, 100%.
Jed, we're going to let you participate in the conversation. We've been having a brother conversation here. We'll let you get the last word as we drop the mic. Back to you, Jed.
Well, I mean, I think it's a great conversation. And I know for me, I mean, just to bring it back to Operation Hope, when you brought up defund the police, when you bring up police reforms, that's really, really complicated. But teaching people financial literacy is not that complicated. Doesn't mean that it's easy, but it's not that complicated. And that is such a strong, leg of the stool to bring people up, to get them steady. And that's something that we can all do, and that's where I'm happy to be an advertisement for Operation Hope. I had financial literacy as a kid. Like, it's not something that I had to think about. It was just something that was part of my upbringing. And, again, to get back to your message of 500 credit score neighborhoods, if we can get those to 600 credit score neighborhoods, then you're just going to naturally see more respect in those neighborhoods. And that's something that It doesn't take the government to do. It doesn't take a college education. It's fairly simple. And that's, again, that does not solve every problem that we've been talking about, but it raises the waterline so far that hopefully the other problems are less hurtful, less impactful if you can focus on financial literacy that is not political. It's not being negative against the police or anything else. It's just a fact. And that's why I'm so proud to work with you and try to help people pick themselves up and learn a skill and a talent that again, it's not that complicated, but if you don't know what you don't know, that's when you get in trouble.
That's it, and I think that's where we're going to leave it. We want to inspire the other teams and the NFL overall to move from this messaging of just take a knee to pick up a book, pick up a pen, pick up a mic, pick up a cause, pick up a community, and teach financial literacy at scale. Teach people how to fish. Let's not just give them a fish. There's not enough of us, and there's not a paycheck big enough that Azeez can get to fund his whole neighborhood, his whole community. That's not sustainable. We've got to teach people how to fish at scale and then give them the opportunity to go fishing every day and growing their pond. And that's the magic of financial literacy. When you know better, you do better. And this would be a wonderful legacy of all this social justice discussion to let the shield, the NFL shield and those within it to become superheroes in their community for something that everybody can get. Financial literacy for all. Azeez, Jed, thank you. I love you, man. You guys are fantastic.
Appreciate you.
Thank you, John. It was a pleasure, man. Thanks, Azeez.
I appreciate you, Jed.
Thank you for attending